It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Millsy, back with the Hometown Commander. And we're back for another episode of Millsy Brews. In fact, the first episode of Millsy Brews of the Doctor Who content season. Millsy Brews is the show where I bring you my version 1.0 deck list of the Commander in front of us on my quest to outbrew your favorite Magic channel. I am beyond excited to do Doctor Who. This is a show that my wife and I both have a lot of love for. A show that I've watched through plenty of times. And just like any member of any fandom, I have my opinions on different characters and doctors and what have you. But I thought it fitted only fair to start with my wife's favorite doctor and one of my favorite doctors and his precon and do some content. The way that these are going to work is each of our 4 weeks we're going to spend in Doctor Who content. One day is going to be the deck itself. We're going to try our best to update the deck with as many Doctor Who cards as possible, and then of course other cards as well. Try to get the deck to a point where it, maybe we bring in some extra cards to help kind of edify the strategy, combine it with other cards from the other decks if possible, and have a good time. And then the second deck of each week will be me taking a alternate commander from that deck or something else and brewing a little bit more, where we're not as focused on all the new Doctor Who cards, and we're kind of doing a lot more fun that way. So our first deck is the 10th Doctor and Rose Tyler, the Timey Wimey precon. We have a Jeskai precon that cares about time counters, suspend, vanishing, and a lot of other things. This is a concept I think is really fun, and I think it's easy to take the deck and think, oh, well, we're just trying to use things to get time counters off of spells to cast them as quickly as possible. Well, the interesting thing about Rose's ability is that Rose is going to be one of our main attackers, as she cares the amount of things we have with time counters on it, not that we cast things from exile. So before we walk into the deck, let's talk about our two face cards. The 10th Doctor, the face of the deck, says whenever you attack, exile cards from the top of your library into an exile a non-land card. Put 3 time counters on it. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. So this allows us to, every time we attack, each turn, to put a card with suspend counters on it. He then has an ability called Timey Wimey. Of course, a very popular phrase that he uses at times during his run on the show. For 7 mana, we can time travel 3 times, and we can do this only at Sorceries speed. What time travel says is that we could take every card or permanent that has a time counter on it and either add 1 to it or remove 1 from it. And we do this 3 times with the 10th Doctor. Now, you may be thinking, why would we add 1 to it? And we'll talk about that in a second after we get through Rose Tyler. 2 mana for a 2/2 that says she gets +1/+1 for each time counter on it, so we can actually time travel counters onto Rose Tyler. But it also says whenever it attacks, we put a time counter on it for each suspended card you own and each other permanent you control with a time counter on it and Doctor's Companion. So we're allowed to have her in the command zone as a partner because we have the 10th Doctor and, of course, David Tennant's Doctor and Rose Tyler, of course, very well known as a combination. Of course, Rose started her time with Christopher Eccleston, the 9th Doctor, and took the rest of her time into the 10th Doctor, of course, seeing multiple scenes that we'll talk about as we get through some of the cards. But okay, so the Doctor helps us get cards into exile with time suspend counters on them. We're also going to play some other things that will do that. Rose cares about us having counters on things. But I think the cool part here is that technically, if we want to try to win with Rose via combat, we want to keep things suspended. And so we may actually find that with the Doctor's ability, we're putting more counters on things, so they stay in exile longer, and Rose gets that. Because remember, Rose gets that every time she attacks. So if she attacks turn after turn, we're getting, more and more benefit from having things exiled. Those suspend counters on them, or vanishing cards staying around, right? We haven't talked yet about our vanishing cards, which a permanent with vanishing says each turn you take a time counter from it. When it has no time counters, you sacrifice it. Well, obviously, in those situations, the 10th Doctor was going to keep putting time counters on it, so it stays around for longer. Let's start with the mana base. I wanted to try to use as much of the original mana base from the deck as possible because I honestly think that this deck has a really good mana base. I think the precons as of late have been fairly hit and miss when it comes to precon commander bases, mana bases, and I think this deck does a really good job. There's only a couple lands I added just because I think they fit the cycle of what we already have, and others just because they're simply really good. Rogran Triome, our Triome, makes a lot of sense. We already had Glacial Fortress in the deck, so I actually added Sulphur Falls and Clifftop Retreat in there, so we have all three of the check lands. We're playing a decent amount of basics, and we're playing the Rogran Triome because then we can use that for the typings. We're also playing the Prairie Stream and the Irrigated Farmland, and those actually both have typings as well, so they're going to help some of these guys come in. Actually, all three of them, if either of these are out, will come in untapped, the check lands, because we have those. I left the temples in. I think it would be very easy to just take the temples out for like the pain lands or something else. But the one thing I really liked that this deck included was number one, our Innistrad slow lands, because they're actually very good at what they do. Very seldom are you putting them down before turn 3, so they're almost always going to come in untapped. And you can relatively rely on them in that way. And then we are getting a couple of the Modern Horizons pain lands there with the pay 1 life and then, draw. I know there's another name for them, probably Horizon lands or something. We do have all three of our reveal a land from our hand if you do it comes in untapped. Just because we're playing enough basics and we are playing a couple lands with 2 types, so there could potentially be a chance where we can reveal one to get one of those in untapped. This would be another section of lands that you could consider taking out for something like the commander lands, right, that come in tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents, or the pain lands. So that just goes to show you an example of how you could increase this the idea of this further. I just wanted to try to keep the deck as close to the precon as I could, in the sense that it's going to help, number one, with budget, if people care about that. But number 2, it's just, to me, it keeps that cohesiveness of the Doctor Who cards as much as we can. Getting up into the enchantments, the biggest thing we've done here is we've added 1 or 2 from other decks, but we have also brought in something from the outside. So we added in an Unearthly Child. This is from the Blast from the Past precon. So all 3 versions of the saga, all 3 say reveal cards from the top until you hit a doctor card, a card with Doctor's Companion, or a vehicle card. Put it into your hand, and the rest on the bottom in any random order. So we're playing a bunch of doctors. We are playing 1 vehicle in the TARDIS, and then we are playing a couple of Doctor's Companions. What the Earthly Child will do is just help get them to our hand. Yes, Rose and the 10th Doctor are our primary ones, but we've also built a tech to take advantage of some of the other ones that we have access to. As Foretold is a card that comes in the precon and actually seems like a good idea. Every turn you get a time counter on it, so this will count for the 10th Doctor being able to put counters on it, and for Rose. And then once during our turns, we can pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell we cast with mana cost X or less, where X is the number of time counters on As Foretold. So every turn we can start casting something more expensive and more expensive. Again, I like it, but I think at minimum it's just another permanent that has a time counter on it that we basically get to take advantage of for Rose's ability. Kraken Time, this is another... So As Foretold, of course, is a reprint of a previous card. Kraken Time is a new card, and I like this, of course, a reference to Matt Smith's one of his story arcs. It says Vanishing 3, so it enters the battlefield with 3 time counters on it. At the beginning of the upkeep, remove 1. If there's none left, you sack it. It says when it enters the battlefield, at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, exile target creature opponent controls until Kraken Time leaves the battlefield. So what I like about this is it's kind of a growing Grasp of Fate style card, where every turn at the start of our main phase we can get rid of an opponent's creature, put it underneath this until Kraken Time leaves the battlefield, and hopefully we can time travel enough that Kraken Time never leaves the battlefield, that's always staying around. We have another new vanishing card in 4 Nox. This is the beginning of your pre-combat main phase draw card, and of course, again, the intention is going to be to keep this guy around to get a draw every single turn. One of the first cards that I saw from the set that kind of broke my heart was Grasp of Fate. It says, this is a reprint, of course, of a commander card in Grasp of Fate. Of course, just got a lot of really great support in both a reprint in Enchanting Tales and in Anthea's precon. But it says when it enters the battlefield for each opponent, exile up to one target non-land permanent that player controls until Grasp of Fate leaves the battlefield. But of course, this is the scene where the 10th Doctor and Rose actually see each other for the last time. And David Tennant's Doctor actually gets cut off from finishing the sentence in the flavor text where it says, as I suppose it's one last chance to say it, Rose Tyler. The implication is that he's going to say I love you, but it actually gets cut off. And so I like this. It's an interesting, it's a good moment. It's a very emotional moment. But again, it breaks my heart that's on a card called Grasp of Fate. Next up, we get a card that I was really hoping was going to be in the deck as soon as we found out that it was something about time counters and vanishing. This was a card that immediately came to my mind. This was originally printed in Modern Horizons 2, I believe. It says when it enters the battlefield, untap all creatures, then those creatures phase out until out of time leaves the battlefield. Put a time counter on out of time for each creature that phased out this way, and it has vanishing. What I like about this is kind of a board wipe in a sense, because it's going to phase out every creature underneath of it, put time counters on it, and then we can choose when those creatures come back. If we catch our own creatures underneath it, maybe we let it go away sooner, but if we catch almost all of our opponent's creatures underneath it, then we just keep it alive. And the cool part is, yes, of course, it can be removed, right, and all the creatures come back, but we might be able to lock someone's commander underneath this, we might be able to lock some people's important creatures underneath this, and again, we can continue to put counters on it with our Timey-Wimey abilities and our other things that are putting, doing this time travel ability. And so this is cool because then we could potentially keep our opponent's creatures phased out. So we don't necessarily always need a board wipe. I think with something like Out of Time and Kraken Time, here's examples of pseudo, Out of Time being a pseudo board wipe, and then Kraken Time being an incremental thing that we can take advantage of to kind of deal with our opponent's permanents without spending a ton of mana or a ton of money on expensive cards to do that. Regeneration's Restored, of course, Matt Smith on the card in the process of his regeneration, vanishing 12, so 12 counters, of course, in reference to the 12 regenerations. And then whenever one or more time counters are removed from it, we scry one and we gain a life. Then if Regeneration's Restored has no time counters on it, exile, and when we do, we take an extra turn after this one. So here's an example of a card we may not want to keep putting time counters on. And in fact, we may want to use the time travel to take counters off of it. The interesting thing here is that with time travel, because it goes off 3 separate times for Timey-Wimey, I believe we'll get 3 triggers of scry 1 and gain a life. I could be wrong on that. But again, here's an interesting example of a card where we want to take time counters off instead of put them on. So you can start to see the deck isn't just literally put time counters onto things. Sometimes we're taking them off. The 11th Hour, of course, the reference to one of Matt Smith's early episodes, well known. The first saga, we're going to search our library for a doctor card, reveal it, put it into our hand, and we have a couple other doctors in the deck we really like that we'll want. 2, we make a food token and a 1/1 human with doctor spells you cast, cost 1 less cast. That's good because, again, we have a few of them in the deck. And then the third says, create a token that's a copy of target creature, except it's a legendary alien named Prisoner Zero. This is cool. We could potentially copy one of our opponent's creatures. We can copy one of our own creatures. And it's a legendary alien named Prisoner Zero. The interesting part about that ability is I believe we can copy one of our own doctors because it changes the name of the permanent. So I believe that would mean we'd be able to have 2 of them because the names would be different. So that seems kind of cool that it would give us technically the option to potentially copy our own commander and have a second copy of it, which I feel like would be really good. The Girl in the Fireplace, a reference to one of Tennant's most popular stories, or very popular story for the implications of it. Saga 1, create a 1/1 human noble creature token with vanishing 3 and prevent all damage that will be dealt to this creature. Kind of interesting, gives us a token we can keep around that can't be dealt damage. On the number 2, it says create a 2/2 horse creature token with doctors you control have horsemanship. That's kind of interesting because we don't really want to be attacking with any of our doctors in specific except 1 in the deck, but this is helpful at least for that. And then on the 3, when a creature control deals damage to a player of this turn, time travel. And that's pretty good because that can be done as many times as we hit someone. So if we can plan it right, on that 3rd saga, we can actually hit people in time travel a bunch. Parting of the Ways. We see Bad Wolf and the Ninth Doctor, of course, in reference to Rose Tyler. On the first one, exile the top 5 cards of our library. For each non-land card exiled this way, we put a number of time counters on that card equal to its mana value. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. So we basically get to save all non-land permanents and put them into suspend with time counters on them. This is great because then we can start manipulating them with our time travel abilities. Second, time travel, then time travel. So that's pretty cool. We get to do that again. And then at the end, for each opponent, draw up to 1 target artifact that player controls. I like this because we look at the top 5, get them into exile with the suspend counters, then we time travel twice. I think it's well worth the 6 mana. It's interesting, and again, the flavor is there. And then Training Grounds made a ton of sense. Gets our 10th Doctor's ability from 7 mana down to 5, and I think that makes it a lot more manageable, and it's well worth the 1 mana. I'm not saying we couldn't potentially have other creatures in the deck that have activated abilities, but again, it's mainly in here for the 10th Doctor because we'll always have access to it, right, as our commander. Getting into our artifacts, we have a good mix of mana rocks and then some fun new cards. Arcane Dissident gets a reprint with a member of the Gallifrey High Council. Commander's Sphere gets a reprint. Mind Stone gets a reprint. That's great there, letting us draw cards. Soul Ring gets that cool new reprint. And then the 3 talismans, we are taking the Talisman of Progress from the Blast from the Past deck and we're putting in here so that we have all 3 of our talismans. But we do have some new stuff. We're playing both screwdrivers, both Sonic Screwdriver and Laser Screwdriver. The Laser Screwdriver is a little bit less of a flavor win than Sonic Screwdriver, but of course, Sonic Screwdriver is the Doctor's tool, the thing that they use. And so we get to tap for an end man of any color. 1 to tap it to untap another target artifact, 2 to tap it to scry 1, and 3 to tap it to so the creature can't be blocked this turn. This is a great ability for Rose once we get her big enough, or some of the other creatures we'll talk about once we get up top to the creatures that allow them to get in and potentially hit our opponents for some damage. We're also playing Laser Screwdriver, which is the Master's Screwdriver. Tap to add a mana of any color, tap 1 to tap target artifact, tap 2 to surveil 1. So instead of scry, surveil says we look at the top and either put it in the graveyard or back on top. And then 3 to goad target creatures. So again, both of them are 3 mana rocks that fit, but I just like that they each have a little bit of difference in what they do. We have Psychic Paper, which is kind of interesting. It becomes attached to a creature. Choose a creature card name and a creature type. Equipped creature has Ward 1, can't be blocked, and its name and creature types are the last chosen name and creature type. The interesting about this is if we wanted to pay off any ways to buff doctors or give something to Time Lords or that kind of thing, we could do this. The thought would be you could attach this to Rose, make her a Time Lord, and if you had any other ways to deal with that or give any protection to that creature type, well then she would have it. But I think at minimum this is just going to go on Rose so that she can't get blocked, or it could be going on our Doctor if he wants to swing it as well. And then rotating Fireplace from that Girl in the Fireplace episode. When it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped with a time counter on it. We tap to add an amount of colorless mana equal to the number of time counters on it, and then we can tap 4 to tap it to time travel only as a sorcery, and that could add another one to it. I like this as an interesting ability. Gives us the colorless mana, and then it can allow us to time travel. And anything that I think is a mana sink to let us time travel will end up being important at some point, I really think. So I like it. Is it worth the 3 mana? It'll come down to how much we can time travel and take advantage of it, but I like it. And then, of course, the most iconic thing from Doctor Who, the TARDIS with those police box doors, is here as a vehicle, a 2/4 flying. It says whenever it attacks, if you control a Time Lord, the next spell you cast this turn has Cascade, and you may Planeswalk, and it has Crew too. Of course, Planeswalk is on the card because the Doctor Who decks all come with Plane Chase cards, something that if you want to take more advantage of, you can find other things about that on the internet. But I like this because it allows that spell to have Cascade, gets us more profitability if we want to wait till after combat, crew this up, get it attacking. And of course, all of the Doctors want to crew the TARDIS, and that just makes sense, right? With them traveling in the TARDIS. Probably one of the cards that was the most excited for people when they saw it was Clock Spinning, getting a reprint in the deck. Buy back 3 so we can pay an additional 3 as we cast it to put it back in our hand as it resolves. And we choose a target counter, a target permanent or suspended card remove that counter or put another counter on it. So basically it allows us to just time travel for 1 mana, but again, we can pay 3 extra to put it back in our hand and do it again. Clock Spinning is a great reprint for that. A new instant, Everybody Lives. This card's kind of interesting. All creatures gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Players gain hexproof until end of turn. Players can't lose life this turn, and players can't lose the game or win the game this turn. Very interesting card. I'm not sure about the last one about players not losing or winning the game this turn, which is kind of interesting. But again, 2 mana, basically Heroic Intervention, hexproof and indestructible for all creatures. And then all players getting hexproof. Just an interesting card. Again, I think we use this to save ourselves more than anything else. But again, interesting card, and maybe we find some fun scenario to use it out. Flatline seems like a really fun card. It says creatures your opponent control have base power and toughness 0/1 until end of turn. This could be really good if our opponent takes a big block on our creatures or tries to get rid of Rose or something like that. We use this and could potentially hit over our opponent for that. Or if they take a big attack and we don't want the game to end yet, we flatline, remove all that damage from the board, and maybe help ourselves out that way. Fury Charm. For 2 mana, either destroy target artifact, creature gets +1/+1 and trample, or remove 2 time counters from target permanent or suspended card. What I like about this is this is kind of in here for 2 reasons. 1, the trample, and 2, the time counters. I think that the destroy target artifact is fine. I mean, it's relevant in Commander, right, with how many people that use Mana Rocks and Soul Ring and what have you. But I see 2 scenarios for the card. Number 1, you put the trample on something like Rose and have it hit really hard if it's not, having another evasion. Or maybe a spell gets put onto the stack, or gets put on suspend with Doctor's ability, and we try to get those counters off of it to cast it this turn. Again, I think 2 mana is worth both of those effects. Is it the best card in the world? No, but I think it fits thematically is what we're trying to do here. We have a couple new split cards in the decks, and my favorite of all of them is Gallifrey Falls No More. This is in reference to a painting that's in the 50th anniversary special. So 1/2 of it, Gallifrey Falls, 4 red. Deals 4 damage to each creature. If a creature dealt damage this way would die, we exile it instead. And then No More, the other half, any number of target creatures we control phase out. So we have protection on one side and a board wipe on the other. I like this card. I like it thematically. And of course, I love a good board wipe protection spell when our format is so popular around not only just board wipes, but exile board wipes, because No More will save us from it. We have Run for Your Life, the 9th Doctor and Rose running for their life. 1 or 2 target creatures each gain haste until end of turn. They can't be blocked except by creatures with haste. This could be very dangerous with Rose, depending on how big she is. And this could be very dangerous for another creature we'll talk about when we get up there. And we can escape it for 4 mana and exile 4 other cards from our graveyard to play it again for 4 mana. So I like it. Run for Your Life, again, thematic for the first episode of Doctor Who of the newest era, where we see Eccleston and Rose running away, and then giving that great ability to those creatures. Suspend, this is a card from Modern Horizons 2 I felt fit right in. We exile target creature and put 2 time counters on it. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. And then with Timey Wimey, we can continue to put counters on it and keep it suspended, which I really like. And then Swords to Plowshares from the Blast from the Past deck. Again, just a great removal spell. We do still need some removal. We do have some fun board wipes and things like that, but we still are going to need some single target removal, although suspend does a great job as well. We still need some. I mean, at the end of the day, we're still a format of all about removal, and so we're going to need to do it somehow. Getting up into the sorceries, we have All of History all at once. 4 mana for a spell that says Time Travel and then Storm. So Storm as a mechanic says when you cast it, we copy it for each time a spell was cast before this turn. And then Time Travel could be an interesting card. Maybe this is one of those ones we try to get on suspend and try to take those time counters off it at the right time. We see Ecstatic Beauty in reference to the episode where Matt Smith and Amy Pond meet Vincent van Gogh in the episode, and we get to see him here in his art. And this is a new one of these suspend loop cards, so it will... Sorry, no, this isn't like Inspiring Refrain. I apologize. This is just a new one. It's a new impulse draw effect where you exile the top 3 and you play those cards until end of turn, but 4 time counters on each of those cards that has suspend. So for 3 mana, we can exile the top 3 and play them this turn, or for 1 red mana, we can put it on suspend and play it later. I love it. I love the reference, and impulse draw is still important, especially when our hand starts running out. We get our new board wipe and Everything Comes to Dust, and this is an interesting one. So it has Convoke, so our creatures can help tap for mana to cast it. But it says exile all creatures except those that share a creature type with a creature that convoke this spell, all artifacts, and all enchantments. So we're exiling all creatures except those that share a type with a creature that convoke this, all artifacts and all enchantments. So it's kind of it's kind of a farewell in that sense, but this is going to hit hard, and I like it. You see, I believe that's Rose, but I believe that's Rose, but I could be wrong. I don't recognize the character in the art there. I apologize, but this is an interesting board wipe, and it gets put right next to Farewell. This is the card that broke my heart when I saw it, because this is, of course, the scene where David Tennant, the 10th Doctor, is regenerating into Matt Smith, and his infamous line, "I don't want to go." And a lot of people reference that they think it's David Tennant saying he doesn't want to go, that he doesn't want to stop his time as being the Doctor. But I really think it's more to do with David Tennant's, his character, the 10th Doctor, and his approach to being the Doctor. If you want to find out more information, go out and check out the show. But of course, Farewell. Choose one or more exile or artifact creatures, enchantments, and graveyards. Again, it fits well. The art just breaks my heart. It fits so well. And I was hoping that I Don't Want to Go would show up at some point on a card in the set, whether it was something. I just didn't expect it to be Farewell, and I think it fits so well. Inevitable Betrayal. We cannot pay from our hand. If we play it from our hand, we have to suspend it for 3 mana. But if we were to time travel into it, we could do it that way. It says target opponent library for a creature card and put it on the battlefield under your control. That player shuffles their library. It's just an interesting card. I think it fits the point. We can suspend it, and it's another thing that has time counters if we hit it off the top of our deck. Of course, we with Tennant's ability, then that's great, because then we have it that way. I just think it's a fun card. I thought about playing the Ancestral Recall and the Wheel as well, but I think there's something you could definitely work in. I wanted to try to get in more of the Doctor Who cards and have more fun with those rather than pumping those in. We get a reprint of Inspiring Refrain, which is the one I was thinking about. We draw 2 cards and then we put it back into exile, kind of suspending it again with 3 counters on it. But the cool part is we can, for 2 and a blue, put it on the suspend stack for a little bit cheaper, which makes it even better. I like this card. We get to see an Ood on the art, but again, this is a perfect example of something that even when we cast it, it goes back on suspend, so we keep getting the value of it being suspended. Renicus Vial Dictation just felt right. Whether we're copying the 10th Doctor or we're copying Rose, I still think both of them are important to our game plan. The 10th Doctor, so we get more opportunities to put things into suspend, or Rose to have more big creatures that are going to hurt our opponents. I just think it fits well for what we're trying to do. We do need to wait to end the game eventually, and I think Carnage Temporal Sundering is a good fit for it. We can only cast it if we control a legendary creature or planeswalker, and we're going to have plenty of them in the deck. We do have a bunch of them, but it says target player takes an extra turn after this one, and return up to 1 target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and we exile Temporal Sundering. What I like about this card is we see it off the top of the deck with the Doctor. We can try to either get it quicker out that way or try to manipulate it at the right time to cast at the right time when we need it. But it just helps us take another turn, maybe get in again with Rose, deal some good damage, or get in with some other of the creatures we have. Adding Ponder and Preordain from the Paradox Power Precon. These are 2 very good draw spells. Ponder, look at the top 3, then put them back in any order. We can shuffle if we want and draw 1, and then Preordain, scry 2, and then draw. I like both of these cards. They're both very popular in blue as far as drawing. They're very, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a Jeskai deck that doesn't include these 2. I didn't put in the Brainstorm, which I feel like is kind of the third of this kind of class of cards, but again, these 2 feel right. We still get to have the Doctor's relevant type stuff on there, but again, great for the deck. The Wedding of Riversong, another new card, of course, seeing Matt Smith's version of the Doctor marrying Riversong. It says draw 2 cards, then you may exile a non-land card from your hand with a number of time counters on it equal to its mana value. Then target opponent does the same. Cards exiled this way don't have suspend, gain suspend, and then we time travel. This is a really fun card because if we have a massive spell in our hand, for example, we can get it into suspend and allow us to use the time travel abilities to get it down if we want to, or just protect something that's in our hand. I like it. It's a good card. I think it continues to do what we want it to do. Twice Upon a Time is a reference, if I recall correctly, to one of the times where the Doctor's incarnations met each other. Here we see them in a snowy field together. Our adventure side says search your library for a Doctor, reveal it, put it to our hand, and then shuffle. And then the other side says cast the spell only if you control 2 or more doctors. Take an extra turn after this one, and we exile it. So here we go. We get a doctor with the adventure side, which again, we have other cards right in our deck that are getting us doctors, right, with a couple of our sagas. Then on the other side, we take an extra turn again. Gives Rose more chance to get swinging. And I think this one feels thematic, 2 doctors being together and manipulating time. And then wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, of course, a popular phrase that Tennant used. Time travel and draw a card for 2 mana. Again, there we go. Manipulate the counters, draw a card. I like it. It's well worth the 2 mana. And we have a picture of on the art of the time he did say it during Blink on the DVD. And so I think that's pretty cool to see that in the art. Well, let's get up to the creatures. And again, a lot of the creatures are either cards from the deck or cards from the set. We only added maybe 1 or 2 that aren't, but I think most of them are from the set. Amy Pond, of course, the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith's one of his companions. She partners with Rory Williams, her husband, and one of the, Matt Smith's other primary companions. So, of course, when we play Amy Pond, we'll get to search our deck for Rory and put it into our hand. It says whenever she deals combat damage to a player, we choose a suspended card you own and remove that many time counters from it. So it could potentially take time counters off something we control if we need to play it quicker. I like this. What this does is allows us to potentially get one of those spells out faster. Clara Oswald, another one of the popular companions, started her time in Matt Smith's era and moved herself into Peter Capaldi, our 12th Doctor's era. A possible girl, if she's our commander, we choose a color for the game. Before the game begins, that's Clara's color. And if triggered ability of a doctor you control would be triggered, it triggers an additional time. This is really helpful for our 10th Doctor's ability, because then we can do that twice in one combat and potentially load up more cards for Rose when she gets to attacking. Keeping going, we have dinosaurs on a spaceship. Referencing the title of the same name, we have a big dinosaur, Vigilance, Trample. Other dinosaurs you control have +1/+1, have Vigilance and Trample. And that may seem like an odd ability on the card since we probably don't have a ton of other dinosaurs, but the important thing is it has Suspend 4 for 5 mana to put it into Suspend. But it says whenever a time counter is removed from dinosaurs on a spaceship while it's exiled, we make a 2/2 red and white dinosaur creature token with flying and haste. So the important thing is we may want to keep dinosaurs on a spaceship exiled for a while to continue to get the tokens off of it if we want to, and then eventually we can put it down and give all of those Vigilance and Trample. I like this card. It works cool on its own with our deck, giving us creatures in the meantime as we keep it suspended, or if we need it, we just rush it out with time travel, get it down, and start swinging with it if need be, and those tokens that it makes. Donna Noble has Soul Bond, so when she comes in, she pairs with another unpaired creature you control. When either enters the battlefield, they remain paired for as long as you control both of them. She says whenever Donna or a creature it's paired with is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. So Donna, of course, a very popular companion for our 10th Doctor, but I kind of like Donna Noble being paired up with Rose, because if Rose attacks and gets blocked, she's going to be big, right? She's going to be one of our primary attackers. Now, if they block Rose, well, we just deal that damage that they're dealing to Rose to our opponent, or we put this on something else, again, one of our other attackers. I just think Donna Noble's an interesting card, and she fits well in that sense. Flaming Tyrannosaurus, I believe this is from the Paradox Power precon, but another dino, has Menace. Whenever we cast a spell from anywhere with our hand, it deals 3 damage to any target, and we put a counter on it. And when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. We're going to end up casting a lot of spells from exile. We're going to be suspending things probably, and so I think Flaming Tyrannosaurus will do good in that sense, dealing out 3 damage to any target every time we do. It's probably a little overcosted for the ability, but again, I think it's fun, it fits the flavors, and it gives us another big threat to have on board. My worry is that we have too many of these small creatures trying to do these time travel things, and we don't always have enough to get ourselves moving in another direction. So I think Flaming Tyrannosaurus will do that for us. Flesh Duplicate, we can have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any other creature on the battlefield except it has a Vanishing 3. I really like this ability because we can copy one of our opponent's creatures, and then because it has Vanishing 3, we can make sure with the time travel that we're keeping tokens on it. Idris Soul, the TARDIS, vanishing 3, and when it enters the battlefield, we exile the target artifact we control until it leaves the battlefield, and it has all activated and triggered abilities of the exiled card, and +X, where X is the exiled card's mana value. So Idris, of course, is the soul of the TARDIS, so the TARDIS would make the most sense, canonically, to exile with Idris, but I think it's an interesting card. There's lots of targets for it in the deck with how many artifacts we have. But again, just an interesting card, and again, we can keep it around with our time travel. Judon, Enforcers, a 5-mana 8/8 that has trample. It says no more than one creature can attack you each combat, and then it has to spend 6 for 3 mana. Again, early game, 3 mana, get it up into suspend, and start taking counters on if we want to, or leave the counters on it depending on what we have going on, and that can help us out with Rose as well, or eventually just comes down as an 8/8 with trample. We're playing K9 Mark 1, of course, very well known for being the robot dog of the Doctor. Gets to see his time just a little bit with the 10th Doctor and his run. So as long as K9 is untapped, other legendary creatures you control have a ward 1. This is great because protects our commander and our other legendary creatures just a teeny bit. And then it has affirmative, his catchphrase, 1 in a blue to tap it. Target legendary creature can't be blocked this turn. Feels perfect for Rose, right? We're trying to get her boosted up, trying to get her in for attack, so that feels perfect. And he does have Doctor's Companion as well, so his searchable off a couple of those cards we talked about. Kate Stewart, the leader of unit and one of the Doctor's allies in some episodes, a 4-mana 3/3 that says whenever you put one more time counters on a permanent you control, we get a 1/1 soldier. So for all those vanishing cards that get the counters, we get to take advantage of those soldier tokens. And then whenever it attacks, we can pay 8. If we do attacking creatures, get +X till end of turn, where X is the number of time counters among permanents you control. Could potentially be a good way to help in the game if we get towards the end and have a bunch of extra mana. We're playing River Song, of course, the wife of the Doctor. She meets Matt Smith, David Tennant, and Peter Capaldi in their time as the Doctor. It says when you draw cards from the bottom of your library rather than the top. And this is cool because in the show, River Song meets the Doctors in the opposite order from their timeline, as he's getting older, so to speak, or they're getting older, so to speak. River's getting younger, which is kind of interesting in a concept. As the idea of what how her character works, and it's kind of interesting to see when she shows up. And then she has an ability called Spoilers. Whenever an opponent scries, surveils, or searches their library, put a counter on River Song, that it deals that much damage to that player equal to its power. So it's kind of cool. Again, drawing off the bottom and then dealing damage to our opponents when they look at their deck. Roy Williams, our partner to Amy Pond, first Dragon Lifelink, says when you cast a spell from anywhere other than exile with 3 time counters on it, get suspend and then investigate. So kind of cool because we can get it into suspend with that ability and then take advantage of those counters on it for Rose Tyler or other abilities. Star Whale, the actual setting for an episode of Doctor Who, a city that's on a whole planet city that's on its back, flying in vigilance. Other creatures have ward 2, and we can spend 6 for 2 mana. So again, a cool 8/8 that we could get in suspend for cheap and take advantage of its ability. The 11th Doctor, Matt Smith, is in the deck, of course. He comes in the deck naturally. His abilities, I Am Talking. Whenever the 11th Doctor deals combat damage to a player, you may exile a card from your hand with a number of time counters on it equal to its mana value. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. So again, we want to try to get him into attacking someone so that we can get that ability. So this makes something like K9 as well also useful. And then it says for 2 mana, target creature with power 3 or less can't be blocked this turn. So it can choose itself to be unblockable, get in for that ability. The Face of Bo, a very popular creature a very popular character during Tennant's time, and an ominous prophecy surrounding it during his run. Tap, you can cast a spell with suspend from your hand. If you do, pay its suspend cost rather than its mana cost. So a couple of these cards that we can spend to put in decks out with counters, and then we can instead cast instead, which is kind of interesting. It's an interesting card. It may mean that we want to just pay 3 mana for Judon and Forces instead of putting it on suspend. Again, there's scenarios that we can pick for all of it, so I like it. I think it's interesting. The 9th Doctor, Christopher Eccleston, comes in the deck, haste, and whenever it becomes untapped during your untap step, you get an additional upkeep step after this step. So at the start of the turn where we take counters off of each of our permanents and spells that are in exile, the Ninth Doctor will have us do it twice, which is kind of interesting because if we can put enough counters on them, we can take enough counters off, right? We get to cast them for free. So this will help us cast them quicker. Of course, it's a downside if we want to keep things in suspend or if we want to mess around a little bit more with that. But it is cool nonetheless, and I think it's a cool ability. We brought the 12th Doctor in from the Paradox Power deck. It says a first spell you cast from anywhere other than your hand. Each turn has demonstrate. Demonstrates ability where you can choose you can copy it. If you do, an opponent of your choice gets to cast it as well. And then whenever you copy a spell, we put a counter on the 12th Doctor. Again, it is an interesting card, mainly because we get to double up on the spells that we cast and potentially get other benefit. Again, useful for some, not as useful for others. But again, the right spell getting copied can make a big difference. The War Doctor, reference to one of the other creatures in our deck that we want to be attacking with, says whenever one of our other permanents phase out or whenever one of our other cards are put into exile, we put a time counter on the War Doctor. So the War Doctor will naturally get counters on it as we do the other things we're trying to do. But it says whenever it attacks, it deals damage equal to the number of time counters on it to any target. If a creature dealt damage this way, it would die this turn exiled instead. This is an interesting ability because we can put time counters on it pretty easily for what we're trying to do with the rest of our deck. And then whenever it attacks, it's just going to hit somebody for a bunch of damage. If you're interested in more about this ability, this deck is actually going to be coming tomorrow. The War Doctor will be coming tomorrow if you're interested in this idea or the idea of this deck. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Time Beetle has Skulk, so can't be blocked except by other creatures. Can't be blocked by creatures with higher power, and is a 1/1 that means not a lot of things. It says whenever it deals damage to a player, we time travel. So this is a potential way to get one time travel every turn as we try to hit someone who we can hit unblockable with Time Beetle. And then Wilfred Mott, the grandfather of Donna. He's in the look to the stars at the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on him, then look at the top X cards where X is the number of time counters on him. We can put a non-land permanent card with mana value 3 or less among them onto the battlefield, put the rest in the bottom. So this is a way to potentially get some of those mana rocks out for cheap. Other creatures, again, interesting card. I think looking at the top X where X's number of time counters makes sense. Every turn we're looking at more, and it can help get us more value. But let me know, what do you guys think of Timey Wimey down in the description or comment section below. This is the deck I'm probably going to end up messing around with, tinkering with. Of course, I'm going to be taking some of the cards out and putting some other cards in. Potentially, but this is a deck that I really want to test and try out, see how it works, and see if this is something that can be interesting. I have a lot of love for Matt Smith and David Tennant, and both of them are in this deck. And of course, I do love Peter Capaldi. He was not originally in this precon, but I'm going to add him in as I did here and have fun. So if you're interested in seeing where the deck ends up, subscribe to the channel. I'm sure I'll be talking about it again at some point. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.